Hello. Hey, how are you? Sunday, Bloody Sunday. By the way, special Sunday, Bloody Sunday here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. It's a Mason Bloody, a Mason Mary. Um, they just taste better out of a Mason jar. Have you noticed that? That you can throw anything in a Mason jar, lemonade, Coca-Cola product, any type of product, just tastes better. As does Bloody Mary. Cheers. First weekend of November in the books. Can't believe we're already there, heading on to week 11, but week 10 is come and gone. And as we always do, we say it, it's cliche. I get it, but it's true. November is the month they remember. And we saw some action on Saturday that is certainly going to have an impact starting this week and moving forward. First of all, a lot of cheers to give out this morning. Cheers to my guy, Rhett Lashley and SMU. And if you're familiar with SMU's story and you're not familiar with SMU's story, you better start getting that way. I know they're ranked 20th. It's going to be interesting to see where they land come Tuesday in the first ever college football playoff rankings for a 12-team bracket. But SMU, first year in the ACC, and they go in and they beat Pitt at home. They absolutely bludgeoned them 48-25. Here's why SMU, to me, is one of the most fascinating stories in college football. Part one. Cheers one. Death penalty back in the day. Craig James, Eric Dickerson, the Pony Express. You know the story, Pony Excess. Basically for doing what everyone's doing right now, NIL. And they were giving out cars, Trans Ams, allegedly. Money from boosters, allegedly. They got the death penalty from the NCAA. Well, what does that mean? The NCAA shut their program down, and it took forever to recover. And so they basically killed a program for what everyone's doing now, way back when in the 80s. And SMU is really just now recovering. And so to come back from something that happens daily to where they are now in the ACC first year, and they're not even getting any revenue. They're paying their own way in the ACC because they wanted to get to a Power Four that badly. Look at what they're doing. Their schedule right now, based on, I saw Pitt in person the week before against Syracuse, and they absolutely bludgeoned them. And I thought they'd go in there to Dallas and give SMU a fight. Nowhere to be found. And if you look at Pitt's schedule for the rest of the season, they go into the bye week next week, but they have Boston College, Virginia, and Cal. Their only loss out of league to BYU. We are looking at a serious scenario with SMU, year one in the ACC, playing Miami in the conference championship. And what a story that would be. Cheers. SMU for hopping in a Power Four and playing really, really good football to be on the cusp of playing in the ACC championship. Cheers number two, Louisville. I'm going to keep it ACC because that's a fun way to start. I'm going to cheers Louisville for going into Death Valley and beating Clemson for the first time ever. They were 0-8 against Clemson, joining the ACC. It's been Dabo Swinney's world and everybody else just living in it with the Louisville Cardinal. But they go in, hostile environment, Clemson coming out of the bye week, and lay it to them. And when you look, that's the kind of thing, and that's what I'm telling you this year in college football, that is the exact kind of team, if you're one of the top, let's call it 15, 20 teams in the country, the last kind of team you want to mess with right now is one like Louisville. 6-3 overall. 4-2 in conference. But if you look at their losses and the parity, just the way the sport is now. And by the way, the win that Notre Dame got against Louisville is looking better and better each week. But let me tell you this. Louisville's losses at Notre Dame, they lost 31-24, 7-point loss, had that game late. The other loss, SMU. How about SMU getting a win against the Louisville team that just beat Clemson? They lost to them 34-27. So you're looking at two losses, 2 consecutive weeks by 7 points. And then the last loss, they had it late, and then Miami does what they do, which is pull away. They lost to Miami 52-45. 3 losses, 1 touchdown, and they get the win against Clemson yesterday. You have got to be careful with these teams that are lingering, that have had a good, not great season, but you look at the losses they've had, those are quality losses that Louisville came up with. All by a touchdown. And now when you look at Clemson and the ACC standings, that's where we're going to get to now. We were in studio yesterday on our all-day adventure trying to break down the tie-breaking scenarios because you know how sometimes these conferences go to like the 5th tiebreaker. And you're like, well, how does that even work? The hell are we going to do there? Now, ACC is pretty clear cut right now because Miami and SMU, both undefeated in league, don't play each other and have a pretty easy path. That's probably a little bit more crystal clear than everyone, with Miami and SMU both sitting at 5-0. Clemson now 5-1. Pitt 3-1. They still have to play Clemson, so that's going to be an interesting one. But right now, it looks as if it's starting to separate itself with those two teams. And what a story it would be that SMU, death penalty renegade program of the 80s, taking on the U, renegade program of the 90s, for an ACC championship and a spot in a college football playoff. I will say this about where the ACC is. For a while, it looked as if it could be a 3-bid league, but you would need a bunch of stuff to happen around him. And I don't think now Clemson with 2 losses is going to get one at large. I don't think Pitt will get one now either, because they were already down to 18 and they weren't being respected that much anyway by the pollsters. And so it looks as if a lot of football left to play. Looks as if right now it's a 2-bid league at best. If SMU, let's say SMU were to go in and beat Miami, and they were 12-1, and Miami was, why am I not doing the math this morning? My math is awful to begin with. But 12-0, 11-1 at the end of the season, 12-1 and 12-1. See what I mean? Sunday, Bloody Sunday, no sleep. 12-1 overall, both of them. SMU with the conference championship. I think the ACC could get 2 teams in, but we'll watch on that one. But I love the story developing there with Clemson now getting beat by Louisville and SMU on a run. Another upset, big picture. Texas Tech, Iowa State. Texas Tech goes in to Ames, Iowa, beats a team in the top 7 for the first time since 2008. Iowa State's been a great story, but the new era of college football isn't going to destroy their hopes. Cheers to Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders. Because when you look at Iowa State now, they got a gift last night with Willie Fritz in Houston taking down Kansas State. And so where you thought you were going to have a day of Big 12 chaos, you got it for a minute, and then it kind of came back to the pack. BYU 5-0 in league. They're in the driver's seat. Iowa State 4-1, still in second, above those 2 teams of Colorado and Kansas State. And let me tell you about this. It's as simple as this. If Colorado wins out, they are playing for a Big 12 championship. They were sitting on a bye week. They weren't playing yesterday. They have, for the rest of their schedule, at Texas Tech, big. Remember, Texas Tech beat Iowa State yesterday. They have Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State, who got thumped against Arizona State yesterday. And think about that for a minute. Deion Sanders, year 2, in contention for the Big 12 championship. If that happened, the network would melt. Like every show in America would be there. Maybe we'd send Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. But that's a cheers to the Big 12 for giving us something to watch. Now, the big games that we need to discuss, because the upsets reared their ugly head in Columbia. The Gamecocks absolutely beat down Texas A&M a week after A&M gets the big win against LSU in the driver's seat in the SEC. A&M, it's still their only conference loss. They lost to Notre Dame at the beginning of the year, so they're 7-2 overall, 5-1 in the SEC. South Carolina gets the big win at home. A&M lost Le'Veon Moss early in the game, and it was back and forth. But Vegas knew something about this game coming in because they only installed Texas A&M as a 2.5-point favorite, and you're thinking, well, why is that? Texas A&M should be a lot better than South Carolina. The Gamecocks come in there and get the win. And so you have to start piecing together these upsets. Cheers to Shane Beamer, by the way, and my friends at the Village Idiot out there in Columbia, America, for showing up and getting the win. And it was really a jumping off point for what we're going to see the rest of the way. Because I've already given you the Texas Tech upset. I've already given you the Louisville upset. I give you the South Carolina, Texas A&M upset. Big picture, maybe some of those in the standings aren't going to be affected too much, but all that does to the SEC, and we talked about this with Paul Feinbaum on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. When you look at all of these leagues now and what's going on, I mean, there's going to be chaos. Look at the SEC right now. In conference, here's where we are. Georgia 5-1, who looked sloppy yesterday against Florida, but they get the win. Georgia 5-1, A&M 5-1, Tennessee 4-1. They play Georgia in a couple weeks. Texas 3-1, LSU 3-1. Well, Texas and Texas A&M play. And so there's going to be so much movement between top and second place. You're going to see 2-loss teams get into the college football playoff. But yesterday just really gave us an example of how this new world in the sport has changed everything. And I don't think, look, for a second, people are like, well, it's going to ruin the regular season. I completely disagree because it's bringing more teams into the postseason. And no more prime example than what we saw between Penn State and Ohio State. Because old world, James Franklin, by the way, 1-11 against Penn State since becoming a head coach there, and or against Ohio State since becoming the coach at Penn State. Cheers to Ryan Day. And come on, Buckeye fans, come on, everything's okay. The new world order is Penn State personified, and I'll tell you why. Any other year, Penn State's out. They're out of the Big Ten championship, which they probably still are now, unless there's an upset along the way. But they're just out of the playoff picture, and people in Penn State are losing their minds. But new world order, Penn State's in. You look at Penn State's schedule going the rest of the way. Washington's tough. They beat USC yesterday. I think that was a decent win for Jed Fish. At Purdue, at Minnesota, home against Maryland. You go 11-1. You're not playing in the Big Ten championship. You're in the college football playoff. And Mullen and I and Joey and I argue about this all the time. If I told you at 11-1 and you're in and you wouldn't have to play in the conference championship, check, sign me up. Because you don't want that extra game, the extra preparation. You get more preparation for the playoff. You don't have to worry about injuries. And so all is not lost for Penn State after Ohio State bounced back. That game for Ohio State was an elimination game. It was not that for Penn State. And so there's the argument of people saying, well, see, I told you, just said it didn't mean anything. No, it just means that there was more of an opportunity for a team to bounce back from a loss, especially at this stage of the season. And so I can't wait. I mean, you look at where we are standings-wise. The American kind of took a hit yesterday. Army survived, but Tulane 5-0. But Memphis went down to UTSA, which is a horrible loss. So right now it looks as if it's Army and Tulane in the American. Remember, Group of 5 gets one in. ACC we touched on. 5-0 Miami, 5-0 SMU. Big 12 we touched on. That's going to be a fun one to watch. Big 10. Here's where we are at the Big 10 as we were just talking about Ohio State, Penn State. They could have 4 teams in the college football playoff. Who would have had that at the beginning of the season? There's a way, and there's a realistic way, by the way. Cheers to the new Big 10. Oregon, class of the league, they look like they're in. Indiana, undefeated, 9-0, tied for a school record in wins. Kurt Signetti, dude, you can't have enough of those. But Indiana now, they have Michigan this week, bye week, Ohio State. That's the game of the year in the Big Ten for Indiana. Because they get by that, they're a lock, but really big picture for Indiana, Michigan at Ohio State, Purdue. Let's just say for the sake of this conversation on the Sunday Bloody Sunday that they lose to Ohio State. If they lose to Ohio State at 11-1 and they're not in the conference championship, they are sitting just like Penn State. And then if Ohio State gets its revenge against Oregon in the Big Ten championship, 12-1 Oregon, only lost to Ohio State. 12-1 Ohio State, only lost to Oregon. Indiana 11-1, Penn State 11-1, 4 teams, playoff, Big Ten. How are you? So what does this mean? Big Ten country, have 3 of these. Big 12 country, have 10 of these, thinking about Dion maybe making it to the college football playoff. SEC, theirs have brown liquor in them. Settle down. It's going to be just as entertaining. There's so much football left to play. But big picture, what a Saturday we had. Start looking above the treetops for some of these great stories in college football. And as we always do on the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate and Sunday Bloody Sunday, kick one back with me. Season's winding down. I'm going to have FOMO here soon. So find you a bloody, find you a reason to celebrate, and find yourself a story outside of the big ones that you're going to follow the rest of the way, because that's what makes college football so great. I might turn